Welcome to Thursday's edition of COVID-19. I'm Min Tan-hee. Prospects for a homegrown vaccine are looking up as Korean pharmaceutical companies seek to conduct broader clinical trials. Also riding on this sense of optimism amid the pandemic is the growing popularity of Hallyu across the globe. Now, we have more on this later on the program. Here first is our Kwon So-ah with the general pandemic updates over the past 24 hours. Right, So-ah?
Right, Sunny, and we are seeing a drop in infections compared to yesterday as 2,564 cases were tallied as of 12 a.m. this Thursday, with domestic transmissions standing at above 2,500 and 25 cases were categorized as infections from abroad. Now, while we are seeing a decline by around 300 cases from the day before, this Thursday's figure represents the highest ever for a Thursday. And the same is also effective in the past 7 days. Let's hope that this will not happen on a Friday, because last Friday we had also one of the highest figures for the end of the work week. Now, with that, Korea has now a total of 311,289 infections and a death toll at 2,481. Meanwhile, over 34,600 people are in quarantine or under treatment. Now, by region, in the past day, there has been a drop in infections in Seoul, Gyeonggi-do province, and Incheon, which make up the metropolitan region. Also a decline here in the southeastern part of the country, with Daegu having returned to the double digits. However, there's been a rise in infections in Gangwon-do province and also here in the center of the country in Daejeon, as well as the administrative city of Sejong. Now, as the recent spread of infections is attributed to more movement over the Chuseok holidays and also private gatherings, it is highly likely that the current social distancing measures will be in effect for 2 more weeks beginning next Monday, and the government is expected to make an announcement regarding that on Friday. Now, let's move over to our vaccination updates. Now, 39 million people have received at least 1 dose of COVID-19 vaccine, which is 76%, and 25.1 million have been fully vaccinated, which is equivalent to 49%. Now, let's shift over to global figures. 234 million people have been infected with COVID-19 so far, and over 500,000 people were added in the span of 24 hours. Let's take a look at some detailed countries here. Spain is now ranking the 10th country in the world with the highest number of infections, having just surpassed Colombia. And these 20 countries until just recently were the ones that had more than 2 million cases. But if we take a look at the further updates here, the Netherlands and Iraq have just hit the 2 million mark in total infections. And here you see the accumulated death toll, while Japan ranks 24th with almost 1.7 million infections. And Singapore, although having a higher vaccination rate than many other countries around the world, saw over 2,000 infections reported in the past 2 days. And those are the updates I have for now. I'll see you back in a bit. Sunny?
All right, so thank you for now. Right, back on the local front, we give you a gauge of the economic conditions here as relevant authorities seek to weather the repercussions of the latest local resurgence in COVID-19 cases. Our Kim Sung-min joins me now. Sung-min, good to have you back.
Good to be with you, Sunny.
Right, so let's start with the worrying data by Statistics Korea.
So Korea's economy appears to be facing some strong headwinds amid the latest surge in COVID-19 cases here. The country's industrial output, retail sales, and investment all fell in August from a month earlier. Industrial output dropped 0.2% amid a slump in both the country's manufacturing and service sectors. Retail sales, a gauge of private spending, declined 0.8%, partly due to dwindling demand for food and automobiles. Facility investment was also down more than 5%.
Right, Sung-min, but regardless of these numbers, I understand consumer sentiment is up, though.
Yes, Sunny, there are a few reasons to believe that economic recovery will get back on track when looking at some lead indicators. First, let's focus on consumer sentiment in South Korea. Apparently, the average consumer is feeling better about the economy this month, even as the country grapples with the 4th wave of COVID-19. Korea's consumer sentiment in September rebounded for the first time in 3 months. Data from the Bank of Korea shows the composite consumer sentiment index came in at 103.8, up 1.3 points from the previous month. A reading above 100 suggests that more people are optimistic about the state of the economy than pessimistic. The improved sentiments are being underpinned by the country's growing vaccination coverage and a rally in exports. This has corresponded to a better outlook on economic fortunes from the country's businesses as well. A survey of the country's 600 largest firms by the Korea Economic Research Institute showed that more of them were optimistic about the economy in October. Many businesses have been encouraged by signals from the government regarding a possible easing of social distancing rules in an effort to gradually restore a sense of normality.
Right, a sense of normality. Now, Songmin, you briefly touched upon exports just a while ago, which remain the main drivers of our optimism, of course. Could you tell us a bit more about our shipments overseas?
Yes, exports are not just robust, but they're actually flying, Sunny. Outbound shipments, which are the bread and butter of Korea's economy, have been on a steady uptrend all throughout 2021. According to the ministry's monthly economic assessment, exports jumped almost 35% on year in August to some $53.2 billion, growing for the 10th consecutive month. This is also the biggest on-year increase for the month of August in any year. And outbound shipments are expected to continue their rally in the fourth quarter on the back of global economic recovery. According to the Korea International Trade Association on Thursday, its Expo Business Survey Index for the fourth quarter was seen at 106, indicating that more favorable export conditions in the near future. The association cited global vaccinations as a key factor that will sustain global economic recovery.
Right, and against that backdrop then, Songmin, are Korea's hopes of securing a 4.2% growth this year feasible?
So far, yes, because there are more reasons to be optimistic about the economy, as I previously mentioned. When we take a look at GDP growth in the first and second quarter of this year, the country appears to be on track to achieve its goal of 4% growth. According to the preliminary figures from the Bank of Korea, the country's economy expanded by 0.8% in the second quarter, which followed 1.7% growth in the first quarter.
Korea's economy is largely driven by exports and government spending. In that sense, given our export rally and the government's expansionary fiscal policy stance, 4% growth is likely to be achieved.
However, experts are cautioning that a potential rebound in COVID-19 cases from an easing of restrictions could be a serious downside risk to the country's economy moving forward.
I see. All right, Songmin, as always, thank you very much for that report.
Thank you.
Right, it's time now for a check on the government's containment efforts and its situation assessment. As always, I have Soa back at the desk with details on that. Right, Soa?
Right, Sunny. So the government in its regular briefing on a Wednesday afternoon had an assessment of the update COVID-19 situation in the most recent week. And infections in the past week have risen by around 13%. Lee Sang-won, an official at the health ministry, broke it down into these following figures.
수도권은
1,543 daily infections were reported on average in the past week in the capital region, a rise of 11.5% from the week before. In non-capital regions, the daily average stood at 486, a 17.3% on-week increase. Also, the reproduction rate of the virus is trending upward for the third straight week, at 1.04. That's 1.08 in the capital region and 1.02 elsewhere.
By age group, the younger population accounted for the highest caseload with 6.6 per 100,000 people in their 20s and 5.4 per 100,000 in their 30s. There were 19 cluster infections reported in the past week, including 9 at high-use facilities, 5 at businesses, and 1 each at an education facility, a religious facility, and a private gathering. Despite the uptick, though, the number of people in serious or critical condition is on the gradual decline, dropping from 363 in the second week of this month to 342 in the third and 324 in the fourth week. People aged 60 and above accounted for the highest number of seriously ill patients in the past week, followed by those in their 40s to 50s and those in their 30s. And Sunny, the government also gave its weekly update of variant infections as well as breakthrough cases. There were 3,066 variant cases reported in the span of a week, and 2,924 of those were domestic transmissions, so the majority. Meanwhile, 7,772 total number of breakthrough cases were reported in the country, but as we are having much more vaccinations, it is a tiny fraction of the total number of fully vaccinated people, but the age group that had the highest number of breakthrough cases were those in their 30s.
I see. Meanwhile, so I hear there's also been some concern about the upcoming long weekends for the month of October.
Right, Sunny, with the nice autumn weather and also many people getting extra days off in the coming future, the official Lee Sang-won cited analyses in the past 4 weeks that demonstrated the active spread of the coronavirus during gatherings among families and friends. Expressing hopes for a safe month of October, he asked the public to keep this in mind.
The major risk factors are shared living, close contact from eating together, and repeated exposure. If possible, we ask you to refrain from trips or gatherings to see the autumn leaves. If you must travel, please do so in small groups and with family members who you live with. Try to avoid busy hours, stay outdoors rather than indoors, and make your visits brief at your travel destination. If you have a fever or respiratory symptoms before traveling, please cancel your trip.
Right. Now, so I believe you mentioned this yesterday, that is on Thursday. Well, that was Wednesday. Probably. Late vaccine registration for those aged 18 and above ends today, 6 p.m. on this Thursday. But the registration rate, I believe, is quite low.
Right, Sunny. That stands at 6.1%. So among those who have not registered for vaccination at various earlier schedules, and that's around 5.7 million people that had the chance to make additional registration. But as I said, just 6.1% have made that booking. So a few hours left, and that's why officials are encouraging those people to make those bookings, because this latest development is raising questions whether the government's goal for October to vaccinate 8 out of 10 people of the nation, if that goal can be reached. But an official at the KDCA's vaccine planning committee, that is, had this to say.
미접종자 인구를 제외한다 하더라도
Even if we exclude the unvaccinated population, we are expecting at least 80% of the nation's people to be fully vaccinated. Giving the unvaccinated more chances to get inoculated, it's part of our goal to expand immunity among the public, which is why we are continuing our efforts to raise the vaccination rate among those who've yet to get their shots.
Meanwhile, as the current social distancing measures are expected to remain at the current level, at level 3 and 4 for the coming weeks, there are, however, expectations of additional vaccine incentives, so that may spur some more cooperation on the vaccination front.
Right, and we'll probably hear more about that during Friday's briefing, Soa.
Likely.
All right, so thank you for that. I'll see you again on Friday.
See you tomorrow.
Right, on a light note now, the global appetite for Hallyu, or the Korean wave, has been gaining momentum amid COVID-19. And for a glimpse of its current popularity, I have Dr. Vorasuang Duangchinda at Sri Patum University over in Thailand, live on the line. Welcome, Dr. Duangchinda.
Hello, good afternoon to you all.
Right. Now, Doctor, in recent years, there's been a wave of K-pop idols from Thailand here in Korea. In fact, Blackpink's Lisa has been working up a storm with her first solo, La Lisa, which saw 10 million views on YouTube less than 2 hours following its release. I believe the response from fans in Thailand has been equally as amazing.
Oh, yes, we love her so much. Well, for her living, her life, the way she talks, the way she dances, the way she sings, she is just a lovely girl to all of us.
Right, indeed. I also hear, Dr. Duangchinda, that Thai fans were thrilled with the traditional headgear that Lisa adorned. What more can you tell us about the soft power, so to speak, that Lisa is wielding?
It's not only the headgear in the video clip, it is also the dress. Okay, so right now, Thai people gone crazy about this. For example, in convenience stores throughout Thailand, they also sell the headgear, just like what you see on the screen right now. So it has been something that never happened at this level before. And given that this is quite a hard time for all of us, the pandemic forced us to stay home, forced us to live the life that we really don't enjoy. Having something like this sparkle our life a lot.
Right. And moving on, Dr. Duangchinda, K-pop sensation BTS has a phenomenal fandom across the globe amid this pandemic. What do you suppose is BTS's universal appeal?
Well, in Thailand, if I talk about Thailand, we love BTS as well. All my students gone crazy about BTS. All my students, even before that, gone crazy about the girls' generation. And right now, of course, they've gone crazy about the Blackpink, especially Lisa. So I think this is something that Korea has set example to the world. How can you combine creativity to the entertainment business? This is something that we can learn from. Very impressive.
Right. Dr. Duangchinda, also on the subject of global appeal. Now, data show Korean entertainment contents have been gathering remarkable attention amid COVID-19. How do you explain this popularity?
Well, I think Korean has done something quite good. Of course, we heard about the term content is the king. If the content is the king, then what Korean have produced would be top level of the kings. I would say start from, if I can recall, Daejanggeum. Okay, after Daejanggeum, we really enjoy that type of period drama. And after that, we start to see something different from Korea. We see a lot of K-pop bands. We see different kind of movies. For example, Parasite. The Parasite did not focus on love, did not focus on the way people live. But this is a different kind of drama. And right now we have, of course, this Squid. And also we have the Blackpink. I can see that Korea has set a new standard in terms of entertainment, not only focusing on one area, but rather focusing on what people around the world really enjoy. So that is something very good.
Right. Now, you mentioned Squid Game, and it is emerging as the leading series on Netflix at the moment. What are your prospects with regard to Korean entertainment contents in the future?
As I said before, the Squid Game is very famous. It is #1 on Netflix in Thailand. It has been for weeks already. We can see certainly that the changing atmosphere of the Korean drama lead us to something that we really enjoy. For example, as I mentioned before, Daejanggeum was one stream period and about cooking. And then we have Parasite, we have Train to Busan, we have right now the Squid Game. We really enjoy different kind of drama from Korea. I believe that is the level of creativity and production that really capture the heart of people around the world.
Right, that is good to know. Finally, Dr. Duangchinda, one final question. Do you believe that, or would you agree that collaboration on the cultural front between Korea and Thailand also serves to perhaps strengthen bilateral ties?
I would agree so. If we look at the history, our two countries have done a lot of things together long time ago, even since the Korean War. After that, so many projects we have done together, but right now we can even smoother the deal. We can even use the soft power of the Korean K-pop, Korean movies, Korean dramas to make everything even much more smoother when we do the bilateral talk. I give you example. I just have some business to do with Korean educational sectors, and we can start with, hey, do you like Lisa? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? And everything has become much more smoother based on that kind of soft talk. I believe that this is something important to business life this day.
Right. All right, Dr. Duangchinda, thank you very much for your time and your kind words.
Pleasure.
Right, come next Friday, the Norwegian Nobel Committee will announce this year's winner of its Peace Prize. For the details on the contenders, our Chia Pili is here in the studio with me. Hello, Ji.
Hi, Sunny. Not surprisingly, the World Health Organization is a strong contender for the award. The UN agency was set up in 1948 to improve the health of people around the world and employs more than 7,000 across the globe. Its stated aim is to promote health, keep the world safe, and serve the vulnerable. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus is the current Director General. This is him speaking at a news conference in Geneva at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic.
I'm declaring a public health emergency of international concern over the global outbreak of novel coronavirus. The main reason for this declaration is not because of what is happening in China, but because of what is happening in other countries. Our greatest concern is the potential for the virus to spread to countries with weaker health systems and which are ill-prepared to deal with it.
The WHO doesn't hold any power to impose health policies on national governments. Instead, it acts as an advisor and offers guidance on best practice in disease prevention and health improvement. The UN body has 194 member states, every country on earth except Liechtenstein, which is a member of the UN but not of its Global Health Agency.
Right, and aside from the Global Health Agency, Jay, I understand there's another strong contender for the award given COVID-19.
That's right. So in terms of COVID, a program aimed at promoting vaccine equity is among the contenders. COVAX was launched in April last year in cooperation with the WHO, the Global Alliance for Vaccine and Immunization, and the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovation. Its initial aim was to act as a vaccine clearinghouse, but back in June, the program decided to focus on serving countries most in need. COVAX had been dealing with vaccine shortages caused initially by the hoarding of limited supplies by rich nations. Now, these countries could garner enough vaccines through separate bilateral deals with pharmaceutical firms. Currently, the United States has donated more vaccine doses to the rest of the world than all of the other countries combined. Here's U.S. President Joe Biden speaking in Washington back in March.
Surplus will, if we have a surplus, we're going to share it with the rest of the world. We've already decided we're going to work with the outfit COVAX. We've committed $4 billion to help get the funding for more vaccines around the world.
Subsequently, vaccine supplies were hit by production snags and export restrictions in manufacturing hub India that held up delivery of much of the 240 million AstraZeneca doses that COVAX allocated in February. It has so far shipped about 300 million doses to over 140 countries, far below its initial target of 2 billion doses by the end of the year. Vaccination rates in some countries, including Haiti and the Democratic Republic of Congo, are less than 1%. The Nobel Foundation announced there will be no banquet in Stockholm this year, and laureates will receive their medals and diplomas in their home countries.
Right, so it's going to be a low-key affair, as will be the Winter Olympics in Beijing, Ji.
That's correct. So the International Olympic Committee said tickets for the 2022 Olympics will be sold to spectators from mainland China only. Also, unvaccinated athletes must spend 21 days in quarantine ahead of the Games. Organizers of the Beijing Games have informed the IOC's executive board of the decision, stating the need to deliver a safe and successful sports gala. The IOC reportedly welcomed the decision as the stadiums at the July Tokyo Games were almost empty. The Beijing Games start on February 4th. Before I go, I'd also like to mention the situation in Slovenia. Police in the Central European country used water cannons to disperse a crowd made up of COVID skeptic and anti-government protesters. The protesters broke through a line of riot police officers to gather on a highway in its capital, temporarily halting traffic. That's all for me today. I'll be back same time tomorrow.
All right, Ji, as always, thank you very much for that coverage.
Thanks for having me.
현재 국내 개발 중인 백신 중 합성 항원 백신 한 종이 3상 임상시험 중이고 4종이 임상 2상에 그리고 3종이 임상 1상 시험 중입니다.
Korean pharmaceutical companies are also working around the clock to develop COVID-19 vaccines. Quite a number of them have shared plans for global clinical trials, raising hopes for the presence of homegrown vaccines in the near future. For more, I have Professor Lee Hyun-sang from Yonsei University. Welcome back, Professor Lee.
Thank you for having me today.
I also have Professor Howard Lee from Seoul National University. It's good to see you again, Professor Lee.
Pleasure to be here.
Right, Professor Lee, let's start then with a few words on the importance of having homegrown COVID-19 vaccines.
I think it's very important priority for the country because there is, first of all, Korea already experienced the shortage of vaccine situations. So it will surely be a comforting aspect to have the vaccine productions capacity with the vaccine that has been developed, which is developed in Korea. But also, it is even more important with the situation of the Delta variant, and there had been increasing amount of the notion that some of the countries are deciding to provide booster vaccines. So there can be even more shortage globally. So it will be important to have some of the vaccine development and production capacity within the country. Beyond the current situation, it will be also important because Korea wants to be a country for the global vaccine hub. So in this regards, it will be really meaningful not only to have the production capacity, but development capacity as well. And not only for this COVID-19 pandemic, but this kind of vaccine, not only the production, but development capacity in the country will be meaningful for the future pandemic preparedness as well.
Right. Now, as seen in the video, Professor Lee, we have quite a number of vaccine candidates. What more can you tell us about our current development efforts?
Currently, 8 local biopharmaceutical companies and 1 international non-profit organization are running clinical development projects to develop homegrown vaccine candidates in South Korea. 50% of them, in other words, 5, are still in phase 1 clinical development, with 4 in phase 2 and 1 in phase 3. The vaccine platforms are as diverse as they can be, but the most frequent platform is currently protein subunits, which is similar to the vaccine by Novavax. We understand that among of the currently available vaccines, mRNA vaccines are scientifically speaking, they are most advanced, and happily, we do have 2 mRNA vaccine candidates currently being developed in South Korea, but still they are in phase 1 clinical trials, so we have to see what results they will come out.
Right. And speaking about results, Professor Lee, SK Bioscience, I believe, is soon poised to release its phase 2 clinical trial interim results. What are your prospects on the efforts of this particular company, SK Bioscience?
For some reason, SK Bioscience has not disclosed the data yet. So it's not quite clear whether, what kind of results we will be eventually hearing at the last minute of the day, particularly from the elderly part of this study. But having said that, based on or judging from the data, from 80 healthy volunteers, it looks like promising because all of those 80 subjects were positive on antibody against COVID-19, and also titer. That is very important. The titer was at least 5 times higher than that seen in recovering patients from COVID-19. So jury is still out there, but looks like we'll be hearing some good news soon.
Right. And keeping in mind what Professor Lee has said, Professor E, what are your thoughts on the possibility of advanced purchases of SK Biosciences vaccine following its disclosure, that is, of phase 2 clinical trial results?
Well, I think as for the advanced purchasement agreement or any kind of pre-order, maybe it might be a little bit haste to expect that, especially from United States or European countries, because they had been reaching a quite high vaccination rate, and also they have the vaccine production capacity of their own vaccine companies. But for this SK Bio developed vaccines, it had been the investment had been coming from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundations and the CEPI. So far, 214 million US dollar had been invested, and among this, about 170 million US dollar will be used for the phase 3 trial. So I think this vaccine is quite meaningful, not only for certain countries, but especially for the developing countries in the long run. And also, even though it may not get a pre-order from European countries or United States, with the WHO emergency use listing, if it is listed in the WHO's emergency user list, it can be used for the benefit of the developing countries. So I think there can be some of the prospect that this vaccine will be purchased for the use in the developing countries.
Right, and staying with SK Bioscience, Professor Lee, could you give us a rundown on the company's planned phase 3 clinical trials?
Sure. My understanding is approximately 4,000 subjects over 18 will randomly receive intramuscular injection of GBP 510 by SK Bioscience or AstraZeneca's vaccine in a ratio of 3:1 and 2 times with 4 weeks apart. A total of 14 hospitals in South Korea will participate in this study, with many more sites in Southeast Asia and Europe joining the study eventually. And also my understanding is not much has been known about how SK Bioscience will manage this phase 3 clinical trial, but my limited understanding is that IVI, or the International Vaccine Institute, is going to be responsible for the management of the foreign part of this phase 3 clinical study. According to the study design, it looks like they will look at primarily immunogenicity, not efficacy, which has been shown or compared in other clinical trials with other advanced vaccines so far. And also, a 1-year safety will be compared between those two.
Right, and talking about comparing, Professor Lee, do tell us a bit about the merit then of conducting a comparative clinical trial, as is the case with SK Bioscience, which will be comparing its vaccine candidate to that of AstraZeneca.
I should say it is a mixed blessing or mixed advantage. It's primarily because the comparative clinical trial or active control trial is not a standard design option for comparing, elucidating the efficacy and safety of any vaccine. It has to be compared with placebo. And all of these studies that have been conducted used in the process of approval for other advanced vaccines, all of them performed placebo-controlled studies. But since we have so many vaccines available, which have shown efficacy and safety, it's not ethically possible to give placebo to subjects who will be participating in this type of study. So it will, logically or logistically, there is only one option that the study gives an active control vaccine to the comparative group. So that's the current study design option. So that's why it's not a true advantage, but it's a mixed blessing. But it will eventually increase the number of subjects who will be eventually participating in the study. But statistically speaking, also methodologically speaking, it's a little bit tricky.
Right, and talking about participating in this study, Professor E, previously on our program, some pundits pointed to the lackluster public interest in clinical trials as one hurdle to developing our own vaccine. Now, having said that, what has been the response to the clinical trial being planned by SK Bioscience?
So globally, there is a necessity of having about 4,000 study participants to be enrolled in these studies for the phase 3 clinical trials. And among the for the immunogenicity studies, it requires about 1,950 participants. And among this, the requirement for the Korean participant is about 93 participants, which is about 4.8% of all the immunogenicity study requirement participants. And in this situation, right now, according to the Connect, the Korean National Enterprise for the Clinical Trial, right now there had been about 723 people volunteered to be participating in the study in 14 research medical institutions. So I think we can say that we have more than 93 people so far. So I think the level of the people showing the willingness to participate in the study is quite in the good level. And I think we have to really appreciate with all these people who are willing to participate.
Right. And staying with that, Professor Lee, what are your thoughts on the level of public interest in clinical trials here on the local front?
Well, it is absolutely too small, period. A typical drug development project requires 6,000 to 10,000 patients to complete phase 1 through 3 clinical trials. This number can easily exceed 40 to 60,000 in case of vaccine development. Of course, it is very unlikely to perform or to enroll this number of subjects or volunteers in a single country. But having said that, the number, by Connect, it seems to be too small.
Right, so it needs to grow.
Sure.
Professor E, the current plan here in the country is to have 80% of the population fully vaccinated against COVID-19 within this autumn. Now, having said that, how does this plan itself affect public participation in COVID-19 related clinical trials?
So far, I think the plan of the government is giving a vaccine certificate for those people who are participating in the clinical trial. So even though the certificate will say that there will be some note that it is a clinical trial vaccine, but still having those people to have the vaccine certificate can be certainly helpful, and also they will be also exempt from meeting from the people's gathering and also meeting, just as any other people who are having complete vaccinations or with the existing vaccine. So I think that will help to a certain degree.
Right. And Professor Lee, going back to your concerns about lack of interest in clinical trials, then you've made that very clear. What do you propose then to further boost public interest in clinical trials?
Sure. Well, there are many that I can think of, but I want to just focus on two things. Number one, we should fill the information gap. What do I mean by that? People do not know what kind of clinical trials are currently planned and conducted and where. That means even if they want to volunteer, in other words, join or to be enrolled in that study, there's no way for them to know where to go and what to ask to whom. In that sense, a nationwide portal, internet portal, can be a solution to this kind of problem. But there's another problem that we have to address. There should be a reconciliation between patient treatment and treatment development. This is particularly important to new drug development against COVID-19. The current practice is, once confirmed COVID-19 positive, patients are sent to regional treatment centers where they are admitted or confined. However, all of those regional centers are not fully equipped with the facility or clinical trialists, mostly physicians, who haven't trained and experienced in drug development before. This is a double whammy for patients because they are not allowed to go to other hospitals even though they want to join a clinical trial. So those are the two things that I want to propose: increase, boost the number of subjects or patients, if you will, who will be volunteering in clinical trials in South Korea.
Right. Professor Lee, staying with clinical trials, of course, comparative clinical trials. I remember you called this a mixed blessing earlier on. Could you further elaborate on that terminology?
Sure. Well, this is a little tricky-ish. So, I mean, in any type of comparative or active controlled clinical trial, you have to secure a sufficient number of control agents. In the case of the one by SK Bioscience is AstraZeneca vaccine. Well, you know what? If you are the manufacturer or the developer of Pfizer's or Moderna's vaccines, and you will not be quite happy if another company will be using your product as a control. So they are not quite inclined to giving you their vaccines as a control. So the first one is to secure a sufficient number of control vaccines or control treatments, if you will, in some cases. Now, the second one, when it comes to SK Bioscience, they will be comparing immunogenicity, not true efficacy. So, I mean, there are many design issues involved in that selection, but they have to first, I mean, anyone who wants to perform a comparative clinical trial using an active control has to decide whether they will be using immunogenicity or clinical efficacy as the final primary endpoint. And that is something that you have to decide. And also you have to talk with the regulatory agency, because regulatory agencies will be eventually saying yes or no to your vaccine candidates. And also, there are other issues that I have to emphasize. Okay, I mean, in the case of vaccine clinical trials, there are so many sites that will be eventually be involved. So you have to be agile and skillful in managing those multinational, multi-sites. And that is something that you have to think about, and which is very hard to perform efficiently. And also, there are tons of subjects who will be eventually enrolled into this study. So you have to develop a very how do I put this? Very skillful, seamless, smooth, operational kind of things to run this study very efficiently. And also, as Professor Lee mentioned, it is very important. I mean, developing is one thing, but selling is another. So, if that vaccine or homegrown vaccine can be successfully developed and manufactured and then eventually sold, and you have to think about procurement and also even pre-order commitment. That is very important because even though you are able to develop a vaccine, but nobody wants to buy it, and then the development is nothing. So I think those are things that every follow-on vaccine developer has to think about.
Right, a very challenging process, no doubt.
It is.
Professor E, what hopes now, moving forward then, what hopes do you have with regard to potential impact of a homegrown vaccine on the global shortage in vaccine supplies?
So, I think it is our kind of brighter kind of like outlook that we are hoping for that Korean vaccine will be provided to the developing countries, especially in countries like in Africa, where many countries the vaccination rate is only like 1, 2 or 3%. So I think with this current support from the CEPI and Bill Gates Foundations for the developments, and with the Global Alliance for the Development of Vaccine with the IVI and University of Washington, hopefully we are, I think, having some kind of a very strong wish that this Korean vaccine can be procured and purchased, especially by a global COVAX facility, for the to be procured to the countries in Africa and Asia. But I think I actually quite agree with Professor Lee as well. I think we should have a stronger evidence to have this vaccine to be in the global market with a stronger confidence. So I think one of the things that we might need in Korea is something like a human challenge trial that has been done in the UK or US, so that having more people to be more actively volunteering and participating in this clinical trial process, not only to protect Korean people within Korean Peninsula, but this is indeed really a great contribution for the people in the global community as well. So I hope more people are participating in the process and to have a more robust evidence for this vaccine.
Right, because we are fighting a global health crisis here.
Yes.
All right, Professor, as always, thank you very much for your thoughts.
Thank you
Professor
very much.
Lee, thank you very much for your
Thank you.
insights. Right, if all goes according to plan, Korea's first homegrown vaccine will be available within the first half of next year. In the meantime, do seek to abide by all safety measures against COVID-19. Thank you for watching.